Again, another week. Hi. So this is gonna be cool. There's a couple of things, as always, that I wanted to reiterate, or there are a couple of things I didn't even mention. First of all, I did want to go back to the Song of Songs. There is just as a general discussion point, well, not really, just whatever. I did want to mention a couple of things about the Song of Songs. The one thing that I think is interesting too, like when you're looking at it, and I didn't really directly address this before, is the sexual love between the man and the woman, and that is like we talked before about the fiery passion of sex, and like the concept of like how. Like fire, there's like this, fire can be good in terms of like it can keep you warm, it can make food for you, but it can also destroy entire towns. And that's where we're at. When you look at sex in such a way, like it can be the most beautiful thing, but it can also be the most destructive thing. That's why it's often paired with fire. We also were talking about the concept of fire in terms of God's fiery presence, which we will be talking about today in other materials. And so I did want to talk about that. Also, I don't know if I brought this up in this study, or maybe way early on when we were talking about mandrakes in Genesis. But like I did, just as a cultural perspective, if you've never seen a mandrake before, no, it looks like a woman.
Oh, okay. No, it looks like a person.
And it was talking, there is a mention of mandrakes in Song of Songs, and there are also, there is also, that's an artistic depiction. There's also a mention in Genesis, like when they were trading mandrakes. It is seen as an aphrodisiac. And the reason is this. When you look at depiction, you can see it's like a voluptuous figure, very much like a woman. It can be very much seen as there is mention of like strong thighs in the Song of Songs. There's discussion of mandrakes as well. And I did want to bring that up because we don't have that cultural perception today.
Is the thighs the man's thighs in songs?
No, it's the woman.
Oh, I thought she said he had thighs.
No, the woman said it. I'll find it real quick.
The woman said it about the man.
No, I'm sorry, no, the woman, no, it's about the woman. I do remember this.
Where does it grow?
In the ground. This is a root.
Yeah,
the plant itself looks like that.
Yeah. Where does it grow? Like what?
Just
in.
I think we have them.
In America?
Yeah, it's just a general plant. Yeah. Yeah, they can be grown pretty much anywhere. Like as long as like the soil is. Oh, that's like the Harry Potter version. You know what's funny?
That one looks like a frog.
This is the Harry Potter. If you don't know the Harry Potter story, the mandrakes are like little babies, and when you pull them out, they're not actually babies. It's a magical creature, and when you pull them out, their screams can actually knock you out. And it's really funny if you've never read the Harry Potter thing. That's the Harry Potter version. Yeah, there's like that's like an artistic depiction. But yeah, there's like an artistic depiction as well.
That looks like a woman.
Yeah.
And let me find the section of the.
That's what I'm looking for.
Nothing 7, I think. Oh, yep. How beautiful are your sandaled feet, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a skilled craftsman. Mm-hmm. Your navel is perfectly formed like a goblet filled with mixed wine. Between your thighs lies a mound of wheat bordered with lilies. Your breasts are like two fawns, twin fawns of a gazelle. Your neck is as beautiful as an ivory tower. Your eyes are like the sparkling pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath-Rabim. Your nose is as fine as the Tower of Lebanon overlooking Damascus. Your head is, yeah, definitely.
Here's the one I was thinking of. It's in 5:15. His legs are pillars of marble,
Okay.
set on bases of fine gold. That's what I was thinking of.
Where were you at?
5:15.
5:15 is the man, the man depiction,
yeah.
and the woman's depiction in the beginning of 7.
Right.
And another thing I did want to bring up when it came to Song of Songs is in the very end, where they end up is in a garden, and they end up under a tree, under a fruit-bearing tree. And there is, and the woman says, I aroused you under the apple tree where your mother gave you birth, for in great pain she delivered you, placed me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death, its jealousy as enduring as the grave. Love flashes like fire, the brightest kind of flame. Many waters cannot quench love, nor can rivers drown it. If a man tried to buy love with all his wealth, his offer would be utterly scorned. And then, and they end in the garden there, and it's there's a lot of Genesis imagery when it comes to like a man and a woman under a tree, and so I did want to bring that up. And yeah, and it's interesting how it's the very last verse is, come away, my love, be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. And it's very paradise-like. It's very much like a paradise. Now, that's said with that. We ended last week at the beginning of Daniel, and I was talking right before we actually started the recording. Daniel is an interesting book because about half of it is written in Aramaic. Now, what does anybody know? Like, while we were doing a little bit of a discussion beforehand, does anybody know anything about the difference between Aramaic and Hebrew? Are they related? Stuff like that. Like, anything that you know about Hebrew and Aramaic between the two languages there?
They're both Semitic.
They are both Semitic, yes. But what does that mean? Like, what is English?
Germanic.
Germanic, exactly. So English is Germanic. It has German-based grammar, or Germanic grammar. That's a common misconception that English comes from Latin. It does not. And we have a lot of Latin-based words and Greek-based words, but we are not based on those languages. We're like distinct cousins. And so the grammar that we use, for example, in Germanic languages, you use helping verbs in order to understand the meaning of a sentence. So, like, for example, if I were to say, I go, but I have gone, but that's just one example, but I will go, I would go, I should go. And then, like, if I were to say, like, I have been going. This is a very Germanic thing. Now, Latin-based ones have a version of the have, like if I have gone, or, well, actually they would say I am gone, but like I have eaten, for example. Like Latin-based languages do that, so they are related. But English predominantly, like tense-wise, uses helping words so our future is I shall go, I will go. In Latin-based languages, it's an ending that's attached to the end of the verb. So in French, you would say j'irai, which means like I go will, and it's like it's an ending at the end of it. All Latin-based languages do this.
And you crazy.
What?
They will make you crazy.
Yes, you have to memorize all of them.
Yeah.
Like if I were to say like and their past tense is the same for them. They would. Now, English has an ED ending that's a common ending. Oh, and Germanic languages have these things called strong and weak verbs. For example, if I were to say I looked, that's a weak verb, but a strong verb would be like I see, I saw. So the vowel itself changes. And that's a very Germanic thing that does not often happen in Latin-based languages. And so it does happen, but not much. But like with Germanic languages, you have like long lists. Like think of it, bring, brought, take, took, eat, ate. Like that happens all the time in Germanic languages. And so that's why English is a Germanic language. So what does it mean to be Semitic? The Semitic languages are known for their triconsonantal roots. They have a trilateral consonant roots. We were talking before about like how 3 consonants can have a direct meaning. So the most easy one to use is in English letters is K, T, B, which has a basis meaning, something having to do with writing. So based on the vowel changes within the word or different suffixes, affixes, anything like that, that will actually change the meaning. So it could be author, or it could be in modern language, it would be bookstore, or if I could say like a letter, or if I were to say like so you get what I'm saying. It's like having to do with something doing with writing, and so that's a very Semitic thing. Semitic languages are part of the Afroasiatic family, so that Afroasiatic also includes ancient Egyptian. So Egyptian and Hebrew were like distant cousins, similar to how English and Latin are like distant cousins. Because Latin, Greek, Germanic, like all those languages, we all fall under the Indo-European branch, and in Semitic languages they fall under the Afroasiatic branch. So Egyptian has 3 consonants. They also have 4 and 2. And that's a very that's a slight nuance. Another thing too, when it comes to the difference between Aramaic and Hebrew, their word for the changes, and it changes position. And this happens in Germanic languages too. If you speak a Germanic language, usually the word the comes before the word, so the book, the man. But in Northern Germanic languages, it comes at the end. So it's if you know any Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish, they put their definite articles at the end of a word, or sometimes they do like a circumposition, which is you would have one that goes before and one that goes after to complement the word. Anyway, I'm a nerd when it comes to this. So this is cool stuff to me. The general Hebrew word for the is ha. In Aramaic, it's and that's put at the end of a word. You can see a clear-cut difference when you look at Daniel, and it's really funny. We're actually going to take a look at it just really fast, just for fun times and giggles. So, for lack of a better term. All right, so at the beginning of Daniel 2. Okay, this is Hebrew, and this is the beginning of Daniel 2. I can easily read this one. And said the king. Oh, look at that, right there. And so, oh, that's easy. So the king said, blah, 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 blah. Oh, the magicians there. And then we have, and the astrologers. This is a way for it. Okay, if Hebrew does assimilation, so this means to the. Like, so this is like this, but combined with that. So these two together become that. Notice the little like T under the thing there versus the straight line. That means that this letter is incorporated. So, but this one doesn't. It's weird. But anyway, so it's wait. No, I'm wrong. This, and this are all incorporated. The way that this vowel changes is because it's before this. But anyway, that's technicality. The to the king, yeah, that the is there. No, that just is part of the word dreams. But then the king is there. You got the king. The king. All right, cool. Now we enter verse 4. Okay, so the Chaldean spoke. Cool. To the king, that's the same. In Aramaic. So the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. Here it goes. Notice there's an ah. May the king forever live forever. The dream, you have an ah at the end. And then you have the interpretation, ah. And then you have, it's really cool. The king, not ha, but it's ah at the end. But it's, notice you still have the M, the L, and the K. So when you go back to the king, M, L, K in Hebrew, right there. So the king, but instead down here it's the king.
Oh my God.
So isn't that cool? Yeah, Hamelech is the Hebrew way, and this would be Malko. Yeah, Malko. And I heard that this vowel actually is an ah, so Malka. In Hebrew, this vowel would be o. So it's interesting. But it's still, I can still read it. I know this is said. Like, I know that's said. I could actually read a lot of this. The decision of belonging to me. It's weird. It's so cool. And it really is interesting. But it's interesting how it begins. The Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. From this point, it's in Aramaic. That's really cool. And then at last, how long does Aramaic last? To 728.
Well, so, 5 chapters.
Yeah, to chapter 7. And I think 28 is the last verse. I might be wrong.
Probably probably after the Babylonians
right.
stopped, and the
and
Persians and the Medes took over.
The dream, right? Yeah, decision. Exactly. So in the third, and this is back in Hebrew, the king. Yep. That's cool to me. I think it's interesting how it was interesting how it says, and the Chaldeans spoke in Aramaic, and then everything for the rest of the story is in Aramaic. So that is an interesting little tidbit. And so, but they are super related. It is much like the difference between English and Scots. If you don't know what Scots is, it is, I believe, a different language. It is a language that is very, very close to modern English, but it is not quite. If you listen to it, a person that speaks American English without any training in listening how to understand Scots, you can get about 75% of it, maybe even 80. But when it gets into certain like regional things, it can get less, like more like 60%. But there are a lot of things that you would recognize. That is not Scottish English. Scottish English is just the accent, right? And so it's like a dialect of English. But Scots is another language in its own right. There are 3 basic languages there. You've got Gaelic, you've got Scots, and you have Scottish English. And a lot of people in villages speak Scots. And there's a lot of recognition within the Scottish community of it being its own language. And you will come across signs sometimes that are written in all 3. So so if you were so that's the closest way I can think. That's the closest way that I can think of comparing Aramaic to Hebrew, especially Imperial Aramaic to Hebrew. That's the only way I can think of doing that. And honestly, if you ever, maybe during break, I can find an example of Scots being spoken. It is definitely, it's interesting to listen to. There's a lot of, like, for example, the word for not is like ne or nah. And it says like he's not there, not that. Or it's like nah. It's like not there, not there. I can't speak it. I never really studied it, but I do know that the word for not is like nah. It's spelled N-A-E instead of saying not. So anyway, so that's all it is. So anyway, all right, cool. So we left off with Daniel, like talking about him more than likely being a eunuch. Do you know who else was more than likely a eunuch in stories, biblical stories that I kind of glossed over last week? I didn't even mention it, but I mentioned
the Ethiopian that got baptized.
That's later, but I'm talking about in a book that we breezed over last week. Esther. In the book of Esther, the male figures, many of them are thought to be, I think, what is it, Mordecai and Haman are more than likely. So
no, Haman couldn't be. He had a family. He had a family that was killed.
It was Mordecai.
He had 10 sons. Yeah.
And then it was Mordecai then. Like, it's definitely, yeah, because I know that there was a discussion between Haman and Mordecai, so it had to have been Mordecai. And Haman, by the way, we were talking about this, I was talking about this in Bible study, not Bible, we had a prayer meeting on Wednesday. I'm like, I never mentioned this in class. So, Esther, at the end of Esther, when Haman is killed, what was he killed on?
Haman?
Mm-hmm.
Spike.
I think he was impaled. He was impaled.
He was impaled. Our translations often say gallows. It just says tree in Hebrew. And so it just seems like a long piece of wood, but the word used in Hebrew is tree. And it's interesting, too, that he got impaled on a tree. And if there is a curse, like that's why we were doing this in Bible, like in our thing on Wednesday. I'm like, I never even thought about this. So there's a section, I think, in Deuteronomy that talks about, like, if someone is impaled, then make sure that you remove them before night. Don't let them last into the morning, because the land will be cursed otherwise. And it's interesting that you got and we were talking about, like, how trees are very much viewed as a life source. We talked before, I think when we were in Genesis, about how trees have, like, a direct access in the biblical thought to the chaos waters below. Not the chaos water, I'm sorry. There's like it's seen as a spring, like almost like an aquifer. There we go. It's an aquifer, but they perceived it as like a worldwide aquifer. And because honestly, think about it, if you dig deep enough, you come across water. And so they thought that all of the land had like a base of water, and so the trees, their roots were linked into that. So they were seen as sprouting up from the springs. And also there's, I remember reading somewhere or something like that, that like when you think of like gushing water, it kind of goes like that. And it very much looks like a tree if you look at gushing water, and it's like a slow version of a gush, of a gushing spring. And that's why there are springs that are mentioned coming from you have the river of life coming from the tree. There's a lot of stuff going into that. Why are we talking about all this stuff today? Well, we shall see. Okay, so we talked about Daniel and his friends more than likely being eunuch. Let's go to a certain verse right now. This is cool. Verse 6 of Daniel 1. Daniel's name changed from Hebrew into Chaldean. By the way, common misconception is that Chaldean and Aramaic are the same thing. They're not, but they're very close. And they're often mixed. And very similarly to Scots and English. A lot of people disagree and think that Scots is not a language in its own right. And so very similarly, you have an argument where Chaldean and Aramaic are often paired. And they're seen as so similar that they're inseparable. And there's more scholarly debate on this, but they think, no, there's more than it's very separate. But anyway, Chaldean/Aramaic, we'll just do it for now. His name changed to Belteshazzar. So what does that mean?
That was Nebuchadnezzar's God.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So, Belteshazzar means, wait. Wait. Bel is the keeper of secrets. Bel is the keeper of secrets is the meaning of the name. And so that's different. But what does Daniel mean? Daniel means God is my judge. It's almost like the complete opposite. Like when you're talking about Bel is the keeper of secrets. Very similar name. But the Babylonian version and the Babylonian God. So it's like, well, wait a second, isn't that heretical to say something? Yeah, Mordecai was and Esther is also based on a Persian god. You have it's based on Mordecai, Marduk. Yep, it was Marduk. That was so you have these big biblical figures that have foreign names of other gods. So, that is interesting. So let's take a look at the next one. What does Hananiah mean? Grace, the gift of the grace of the Lord, the gift of the Lord. Then you have No. Oh, come on. I had it before. Just give me 1 second, guys. Maybe it's this one. Command of the moon god. The command of the moon god. You have Mishael, which means, I think, who's like God. Who is what God is. Who is what God is. But then that becomes Meshach, which means who is who Aku is. So it's really, and then you have Azariah. Means Yah has helped. But then you have Abednego, which is servant of Nabu. So it's So I think I understand why biblical translators don't translate their names. So, especially here. But it's funny because I think it just shows that it's not the name is not the issue, it's what they do, how they act. But they assimilated. They really assimilated. They took on the Babylonian culture. They dressed like Babylonians. They were prepped for the court. They spoke the language. They learned. It talks about like how Daniel was like the most knowledgeable when it came to like Babylonian studies. He knew what so it's not bad to do so. Like it is seen as like, oh, you are being generous and helpful. When Jeremiah talks about pray for the shalom of the place that you live in, like pray for the shalom of those who take hold of you. And it's and when it comes to Daniel, he absolutely did. When Nebuchadnezzar had his dreams, Daniel was right there. And he just asked for more time. He went to Yahweh. And God showed him the meaning of the dream, and Nebuchadnezzar said, "Great, like this guy is great." And then in the next chapter, builds a statue. But the thing is, the one thing about Nebuchadnezzar is he did not view Yahweh as his only God. he said Yahweh is a great God, but he did not. And so this building the statue, he was just doing what his culture does. He showed his greatness. He basically told people to bow down to this statue. When they refuse, so there's a lot of like God's work is moving through this. Another thing too is when Daniel refuses to drink the wine and eat the meat. This is going back straight to Genesis. What does God say that you can eat in Genesis 1? Is it 1? It's definitely early Genesis.
Seed-bearing plants.
Any of the seed-bearing plants. What does Daniel specifically ask to eat? And they say, oh, but you won't be strong enough.
The plant.
Seeds, vegetables
Yes.
that are particularly the seeds of the plants, and so he is being very Eden-like in the way that he's acting. In a sense, he is ruling and subduing through servitude. It's a we were talking about how Joseph, how Moses, how like all these different characters throughout what we've been studying, it's always through servitude you get the most Jesus-like characters of the Bible. Daniel, I think we brought this up here, but I might have just been from like different conversations for individuals in this gathering, so I'm just going to restate it just in case I never did say it in this recording. Daniel is seen as a primary character that does not have a fault, but there is a fault, and there is only one that is mentioned. Does anyone know what that fault is? Like, for example, Joseph faulted at the very end when he started, like, storing grain for him. Like, when he started, like, keeping possessions and having people sell themselves and become slaves. That was when Joseph kind of, like, fell out of grace. But he was still in grace. You know what I'm talking about. Like, it was, like, where he was like, almost, but not quite. Where is it with Daniel? It does happen in one occasion. Do you know? Anybody?
No, not me.
Chapter 11. Let's go ahead and turn to the very last chapter there. Oh, I'm sorry, 12. Sorry. Woo! I do not know how many chapters are in Daniel.
Okay.
Exactly where it is. There's was it 11? Mine's 11. Hold on one second. Oh, sorry, it's chapter 10, verse 15. Sorry. Wow, I thought it was closer to the end than that. While he was speaking to me, I looked down at the ground, unable to say a word. Then the one who looked like a man, he looked like a man. Sorry, that's a reference. He looked like a man. If anyone doesn't know, there's a thing on Mad TV when someone's asked, like, can you give a description of what he looked like? And she's like, he looked like a man.
He looked like a man.
Yeah, he looked like a man. So, anyway, so then the one, he looked like a man, touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and began to speak. I said to the one standing in front of me, I am filled with anguish because of the vision I have seen, my Lord, and I am very weak. How can someone like me, your servant, talk to you, my Lord? My strength is gone, and I can hardly breathe. Then the one who looked like a man touched me again, and I felt my strength return. And don't be afraid, he said, for you are very precious to God. Peace Be encouraged. Be strong. As he spoke these words to me, I suddenly felt stronger and said to him, Please speak to me, my Lord, for you have strengthened me. He replied, Do you know why I've come? Soon I must return to fight against the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia, and after that the spirit prince of the kingdom of Greece will come. Meanwhile, so anyway, it's his spiritual weakness that is actually like his now.
Isn't that a little bit of a stretch right here? After everything he
went through, yeah, I know. Yeah. I personally thought so too, but it's like he gets sick and he is unable to. Like the thing is, though, Jesus got sick as well, but this is actually seen, guaranteed. I guarantee it. Like this is actually the point where people think
this after he's fasted like for 20 days or something. He's fasted a long time.
Perhaps, right? Yep. But he's like, I can't. Yeah. I've returned to the Lord God and Stephen from prayer and fasting. Right, I know. But this is like now. This could be where I'm presenting what I personally feel the same way. This is definitely the scholarly interpretation. Wait a second. The scholarly interpretation is this is where he falters, and he's not seen as the one to bring as one to bring fulfillment. First of all, the angels told him anyway, just go your way because you're not going to figure out what happens until the end of time. Okay, that's one thing. But the other thing too is we've come often across a difference of opinion between scholars. Where you have the scholarly interpretation of things not necessarily meshing with how the Bible actually says things. I still have a problem when it comes to this. However, there is a lot in terms of this is what is very much seen as his weakness. This is what's very much seen as his physical inability to handle the truth that's being revealed to him. And it's weird to me, but this is what is said. And so I will definitely, right now, as it stands, I can see what that is. I remember something being involved. Hold on. No, it's not. No, I did think that there was another statement that was more compelling, but I'm presenting it as like definitely what is often viewed as his weakness, which, okay, I'm going to back up a second. If you're looking at this from a Jewish perspective, I can see that. So like if you're looking at this from a Jewish perspective, I think that might be where they have strength in terms of looking at things, because like the person that's seen, and you will see, we're going to be talking about Zechariah. The person that's seen as being like the Messiah is seen as being stalwart, not faltering in any way, shape, or form. And I can see it from the Jewish perspective, and that's what this Bible study is like focused on in terms of like the way the scribes saw it. When you have Jesus that came along, though, he had weak moments as well, like so. But there's something in me, though, even though I'm uncomfortable with the idea, there's something in me that sees Daniel having a weakness here. Because even when Christ was weak, he did it through his own ability. He did it by submission. He didn't say how. He didn't say, where am I going to get this from? Like, or like, how can I even speak? He, even in Gethsemane, he asks for the cup to pass from him, but he doesn't say, how am I going to do this? I think it's a nuance. I think it is, like what Mom was saying, potentially a stretch, but I can see the point. I can actually see where they're going with this. The Jewish perspective.
Are you saying as far as Daniel be qualifying to be the Messiah? Is that what you're saying?
A Messiah-like figure. The Hebrew Bible is filled with people that don't quite make it. And
right.
So you have.
Oh, are they saying that's why he doesn't quite make it?
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying here.
I don't think he would be qualified just because he was a eunuch, and based on Judaism.
I don't think that would have qualified. No, I don't think that would have disqualified him.
In the scriptic or the scribes' eyes.
They couldn't. I don't think eunuchs could enter the temple, could they?
No.
I think they were restricted. I'm not positive. I think that's in Levitical. What?
Yeah.
If David entered the temple and ate the bread, oh my goodness, we are going into some interesting stuff.
No. But staying on point, though. I'm just staying on your point about Daniel. I don't think Daniel had any faults that were recorded in the book of Daniel. I'm sure he had faults. But I don't know how. He's one of the few that don't.
Yeah, and Paul says, when I'm weak, I'm strong.
Elijah doesn't. Go ahead.
Yeah, not Elijah. But Paul said that when he was physically weak, then he was strong.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, if you go to just read a little further, when he says, "How can I do this?" and the one who looks like a man says, "Be strong." Here, and he says, "I was strengthened then." So he then was strengthened, but it wasn't like he did anything wrong.
Yeah, and like your mother said, after 21 days of fasting and seeing all these prophecies, hoping that he was going to return in 70 years to the Promised Land again, and that happened. And I can't fault him for any of that myself. I don't know how you could do that.
I don't think he was wrong. To ask a question. Talking about his inability to that he got afraid and that he faltered. Now Christ was afraid too, but Daniel was afraid because of the presence of the. It's a weird thing. It is definitely talked about. So it's okay. Talking about his eunuch-like nature. That's another point. You're right. When it comes,
well, wait a minute. Based on what he went through, he was more of a man than most of the men written about in the Bible.
That's absolutely true.
So eunuch-like nature, I don't think has anything to do with it.
There's
very, very strong.
I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in this one too. There's potential he was not crushed in terms of his testicles. There's potential there. I don't like this argument. I will say this. I'm going to present this. There is an argument that we're talking about stretches before. I think it's a potential stretch. Although I did present the potential stretch with that section of David with that three word sentence. In more modern interpretation of you got to be careful with modern interpretations because sometimes they try to get in there and try to make things say that something that they're not. However, I see their point. I see there is potential that there was a relationship between Daniel and the chief of the eunuchs because it was talking about how he had a profound love for him. So that I can see. The argument is he didn't have a physical deformity. So that's and I'm like, okay, I can see the point. I think that's a stretch, because if you were even in the royal court, even if you were gay, they would have crushed your testicles to be absolutely sure. And so they would have made sure. And I think there would have not been an exception in this case. And so as such, yeah, I can see where Dad's going with that, like that he would not have been able to have entered the, but yet he was still in the presence, because like you had like the man that looked like a man that touched his lips. It's like, how would he be allowed in that presence? If it's a weird thing. Like, it's a weird conversation.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I think it had to do with the ritual of Leviticus and the temple, entering the temple in the presence of God and stuff about that. But I don't think it was necessary. It wasn't like they were sinners and going to be damned for all eternity because that.
No. Oh, I never saw it that way. But you're talking about, like, how you see this not being that type of Messiah-like figure, potentially because of a physical deformity or a physical alteration.
But what I'm saying is I don't think that's really a fault either, because I don't think he had a choice.
No, I don't think so either. And not to mention, the temple is long gone by this point. So so there was no temple, and so I can see that as being a point too. That even if his testicles were crushed, like that, God doesn't really that had to do with the temple, not having had to do with like just him being in God's presence at all. So yeah, I can absolutely see this. This is really cool, because right now, remember when I said that I can't wait until we're actually in Daniel? We're talking about some stuff that's really brain tickling here. And I think it's interesting to ponder these things. What?
Yeah, the symbolism of the temple, though, if it was something where someone had been emasculated, almost everything that went on physically in the temple and the tabernacle had to do with spiritual. It was the spiritual symbolism.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
So with Daniel, there was no temple involved. With Daniel, it wasn't the alteration that would separate him from God like it would in the tabernacle, because that was symbolic.
Right. No, that's what we're talking about.
So, and he was strong and whole in the spirit.
Right.
He wasn't.
Yeah, because the person that looked like a man said that.
Yeah.
The person that looked like a man said, "You're precious. You're favored." Mm-hmm. And yeah. And I'm just looking here.
Can I ask a question? Just to throw a monkey wrench in the works? In chapter 10, verse 19, what's the Hebrew? I was just interested in why the one who looked like a man called Daniel a man, when generally eunuchs they called eunuchs.
No.
No? Really?
No.
They called them men?
Did they talked about Mordecai as a he and as a man.
Yeah, but Mordecai, the indication is he didn't live in the palace.
Right.
He lived in the city.
No, they would have not considered him not being a man. That he would have still been a man. A paralytic was still called a man. Like anything that was not, even if you didn't have a whole body, you were still called a man. That's clear cut. But what's the verse?
19. Man.
Greatly beloved man. Yep. Yeah. I think the only thing that might have been restricted would have been the word for male in Hebrew. That might have, because he would have been, this is the thing, like, it never mentioned him as not a man. They would, like, it refers to him as eunuch. There was a word, I forget the word, but it's a three-letter word. But there's a word, but it wasn't universally used. It was just that, like, if you worked in the court, it was pretty much assumed that you were a eunuch, but they still referred to each other as men. It's other cultures that don't, but here you're still called a man. the eunuch that Paul, I think it was still masculine, like.
You mean Philip?
Yeah, I think it's still masculine endings, and I don't know Greek. I can't guarantee it, but they're still referred to it as a man.
Okay, referred to it as a male. Well, they would have had to have picked something. I mean, some.
Yeah, exactly.
Gender.
I mean, it's like, okay, I'm just going to go, wait a second, hold on. I'm just going to go into, modern stuff. Like, if you're talking about, a gay person or, a lesbian, they're still considered a man and a woman. You would still, that's still very much what's referred to. It's only, through transgenderism that the pronoun shifts. We're not talking about Christian, concepts. We're talking about, just modern societal values. You have that's only through transgenderism that the pronouns switch. You would still refer to a gay man as a man. Even someone that can't have children, that is still called a man. So, or a woman. You know what I'm saying. So, okay. Anything else before I hammer down a couple more points? There is a dream that greatly troubles Nebuchadnezzar. It's the second dream that's interpreted, and it's the one that leads him into ruin. And Daniel said, I wish this never happened to you. Or that I wish that this, what is it about? A tree. A tree. And it's funny because it's like you got this tree that grows up, and then God says, cut it down. And it's funny, the word, now this is in Aramaic, but the word for cutting off or cutting down, like I'm going to cut off my people, it's like you're cutting off a branch. And it's it's very much, it's the same imagery. And so, yeah, you got to cut down the tree and lop off its branches, shake off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. And so God himself is removing the fruit from this very tree. And what happens to Nebuchadnezzar, he becomes like an animal. And he is very much like an animal. And we're talking about how he returns to, and it's a really interesting read. Yeah, it's. Yeah, I would say, yeah, he lived this way until his hair was as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like bird's claws. Like he became a beast. And can't wait till we get into beast imagery. So, okay, the writing on the wall. What happened that caused God to be so angry when when Belshazzar took the throne? What was it that made God so angry? Because he was not so, he was not really ticked off, with Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, he had some issues with Nebuchadnezzar, but, his thing with Belshazzar was, no. It's not happening. Can anybody answer that one?
They profaned the sacred vessel.
Exactly. They took the cups from and all the bowls and stuff like that, and they used from the temple, and they used them for their party. And so God was ticked. And so he wrote many a particular person on the wall. And this is something I learned long ago, and you're very right. What happened, Mom or Dad, whoever would like to say, what happened to Belshazzar when he saw the hand?
He needed to pen.
He lost control of his bowels. It basically talks about he lost the control of his loins. That was and yeah, it was not a very favorable thing that you've been weighed in the balance and you have been found wanting. That's not. You got Daniel in the lion's den. The concept of him living peacefully with a lion is also a symbol of garden-like imagery, where we're talking about the lion with the lamb type of thing. It's very much the idea that in Genesis the beginning of Genesis, like you had these animals that did not. We looked at that image of what was it? Like, was it a cat eating? Like, I forget what it was, but we were looking at like a medieval portrayal of like the Garden of Eden, and there was like this cat that was going after some animal, and well, that isn't imagery. But yeah, it was like that. Well, all animals are at peace, and so that's where the image comes in with Daniel. So anyway, you got the 4 beasts. Well, the interpretation is pretty clear. Like talking about like the different like nations and stuff, and like this is before like, the Greek stuff. Anyway, that's pretty clear. There's a lot of discussion on that in other Bible classes. A lot of people focus on the final chapters of Daniel rather than the beginning, and which is cool. I love it. Makes my job a lot easier. End of 7. That was the end of the vision. I, Daniel, was terrified by my thoughts, and my face was pale with fear. But I kept these things to myself. That's another example of him faltering. And was talking about the little horn and like the ghost. It's a lot of like prophetic imagery. It's very, very horns. Oh, by the way, horns are almost they are universally referred to as nations. And then like beasts are more like these spiritual things that have these horns that they manipulate. It's like it's cool. Like for example, you have like the 7:7. Then in my vision that night I saw a 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful, and very strong. It devoured and crushed its victims with huge iron teeth and trampled their remains beneath its feet. It was different from any of the other beasts, and it had 10 horns. As I was looking at the horns, suddenly another small horn appeared among them. 3 of the first horns were torn out of the roots. So you have the beast power that was great, and it's like the beast itself is considered like this like spiritual force. And then you have like the horns that are under it's on top of it. It makes its own kind of like animalistic crown type of a thing. And then you have like in Revelation, you got like the horns have crowns. So it's cool stuff. But basically, beasts are more like spiritual powers. Like the first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings. As I watched, its wings were pulled off, and it was left standing with its 2 hind feet on the ground like a human being, and it was given a human mind. Then I saw a second beast, and it looked like a bear. It was rearing up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and I heard a voice saying to it, "Get up, devour the flesh of." Yeah, this is spiritual being that's being referenced here. It's not the actual nations. The nations themselves are the tools of the spiritual forces. And so it's it's really that's how it was viewed then and viewed today. I feel that translated well throughout the thousands of years. Then you have like then you have like the time of wrath. There's a lot that goes into this. It does have to do. This is the second time, I would say. This is the first. I would say the first. It's arguable. I would say this is the first time of end time type of imagery. The reason is, even Joel and even Zechariah and even other ones, it's like it was debatably not. But when you have this stuff, especially when you have this book that's mentioned, like a book that, I think it's the Book of Truth here, and it's talking about and then he says, and then he's told by the angel to roll up this scroll, and put it away, and go on your way, and you will find out these things at the end of time. It's very much talking about future, like very, very. This is our modern perception of prophetic. It's very prophetic, having to do with end time stuff. It is a mystery. A lot of people have spent their entire lives trying to decipher what is being referenced in the end of Daniel. But there is a lot going into like his relationship with God, his closeness to God, and the fact that he was actually revealed these things is like a genuine depiction of how close he was to God. There isn't, in my opinion, there are arguments against it. In my opinion, there is nothing else like it in the Old Testament when it comes to the prophetic imagery that's revealed to him. And so it's basically, Daniel is like the Old Testament version of John when the revelation of Christ comes to him. And I think it's just like I guess you could say a portrayal of that. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying or not, but yep. So because it says like okay, like in 12:2, many of those whose bodies lie dead and buried will rise up, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting disgrace. Those who are wise will shine as bright as the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever. We were talking about the stars being part of God's counsel. And now this is humans being portrayed as being allowed as stars into God's domain. This is very symbolic. But you, Daniel, keep this prophecy a secret. Seal up the book until the time of the end, when many will rush here and there, and knowledge will increase. Then I, Daniel, looked and saw two others standing on opposite banks of the river. One of them asked the man dressed in linen, who was now standing above the river, how long will it be? And then it goes on into that. But, so, it's clear. It's talking about like when true restoration will happen. Joel debatably talks about that. Zechariah debatably talks about that. But Daniel absolutely talks about that. And this is also the first inkling of a life everlasting. It's interesting that it says that people will raise to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting disgrace. What's the opposite of life?
Yes.
Death. What was the first curse? What was the result of sin? The wages of sin is
death.
Death, right? So, like, this is basically saying, like, some, like, so, and it says, so many of those whose bodies lie dead and buried will rise up, and so their bodies rise up. Mm-hmm. Some to everlasting life, some to everlasting, like, what is it? Disgrace.
Yeah.
And it's like, and what is the greatest disgrace is death. Like, this is something that God hates. But because of the choices that people make, this is what's being inferred here, and there's absolutely no discussion on that one. It's like what's being inferred here is there are some, because of what they have done, will be left dead, or will rise and then be put to death. Like, it's like, okay, you're done. Like, but those who are wise will shine as bright as the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever. And this is basically saying that it's one way or the other. You're going to get everlasting life, or you're going to get everlasting disgrace. And the opposite of life is death. Like, what the opposite of blessing is curse. Like, it's blessing and cursing. It's like you have life and death. In my opinion, it's black and white. Like, it's a very black and white meaning there. And
no
so
gray areas.
There really, in my opinion, there isn't. Yeah. We're going to talk about where the gray area begins. I don't know if we'll get to it tonight, but this is what Daniel's thing is saying here. Okay, so this is the first time that we're talking about everlasting life like true everlasting life in the Old Testament, and this is really cool to me. And this is something this is interesting too. That's getting close to the end of the Hebrew Bible, and so that's yeah. There are other things in Daniel that I like. I think it's a really cool. Ooh. Angels in Aramaic are called watchers, and so it's there's so much going into that word right there. What did men do? Certain men during the night, what would they be called?
Watchmen.
Watchers. They would watch. They would talk about the first watch of the evening, the second, the third. And so watching and seeing is a very interesting thing here. And so the angelic beings in Daniel are referenced as watchers. So it's so cool stuff. And it's like they see, and it's talking about those who are stuff like there's a lot. One thing that I got to mention this before we go into break. One thing that I think is absolutely cool is I just want to make sure I get that because I just saw a message. Sorry. Wait a second. I was talking about watchers. Oh yeah, I was studying Hebrew this week, and I came across the word that means to reveal, right? And the word in Hebrew, the tri-letter root has something to do with the uncovering. Like when it also has to do with unveiling, and it also has to, there's a lot of sections of this, like Noah becoming unveiled to his nakedness. You also have the unveiling of when the skies retreat. It's the unveiling. Remember, we're talking about how the heavens are seen as like a tenfold. And so that word can also mean like the pulling back of the tent or of the folds. When you entered the tent of meeting, you would pull back the folds and then it would be revealed. That is the biblical word for, the Hebrew word for what we often translate as revelation as well as apocalypse. And so it's interesting too that it's funny because I'm listening to the Bible Project and they're talking about apocalypse right now. I'm like, that's funny because they were talking about that word. That was today. I heard that as I was driving out to Canton, and then I was like, oh, that's funny. I just learned that word. So anyway, but it's funny because I was just talking to my pastor because he was asking me a question if I got a certain bit of information from the Bible Project. I'm like, maybe, probably, and then I think it was later. But the thing is, it's funny because my Hebrew studies and the Bible Project are like doing this right now, and it's really cool. So, and it really is cool. Like digging into some other scholars and stuff like, it is so much, but. That's why I love this stuff. So anyway, that's all I got on that. Does anyone have anything on Daniel they wanted to say before we go on break?
Very interesting.
Okay, we will go ahead and take our break. I'll see you guys on the other side. We are back. All right, so. The next in line after Daniel in terms of traditional order, and I was talking to Linda, my pastor's wife, about how the traditional scheme of the Hebrew Bible is not dead set, but there is a more common tradition when it comes to that. So we're in the more common tradition of the ordering of the books. You have the Torah, you have the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. And the Ketuvim is the one that is highly varied. The order of the books is kind of a hodgepodge. But the general one is like the three wisdom. You got the five of like Esther and like Lamentations and stuff like that, and then you have Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, which is considered one book, and then you have Chronicles, which is also considered one book. So that's how the ordering, the more traditional, the more accepted Jewish way of looking at it is. But that's just basically how we are. Now, we are entering Ezra and Nehemiah, but does anybody know who their contemporaries were in terms of biblical prophets? They're actually mentioned in Ezra and Nehemiah.
No, it was earlier, I believe.
I won't actually mentioned. What?
Isaiah was earlier. They were during almost the same around the same time as Esther.
said Hosea. I said
Hosea. Oh, okay.
I think Hosea was a contemporary. I'm checking.
I know that they were during around the time of Esther and Mordecai.
Before its fall. Go ahead. Yeah, there. I remember.
Esther and Mordecai stories there. Around the same time period.
But prophet-wise, these two prophets are mentioned at the beginning of one of the chapters of Ezra and Nehemiah. Both of them.
Ezra, not Ezekiel. Could it be Ezekiel at Babylon? No, he was in Babylon. I don't know.
Haggai and Zechariah.
Haggai and Zechariah.
Both of them. And so we're going to take a quick look at Haggai, so the 2 chapters. Basically, all Haggai is talking about is rebuild the temple and don't do the things your ancestors did.
Good advice. Good advice.
No, but it does say, I think it's Haggai that says from this day forward, don't do that. And I'm trying to think of, is it this one? But he does go into an interesting thing about now if someone touches a dead person, are they going to become unclean? And they're like, yeah. So that's an interesting discussion. But I think it's interesting here in Haggai 2:18 when it says, "Think about this 18th day of December." Now this is the NLT translation. There's the actual day that's referred to is the 21st day of the 9th month. When the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid, think carefully. I am giving you a promise now while the seed is still in the barn, or is the seed yet in the barn? You have not yet harvested your grain, your grapevines, fig trees, pomegranates, and olive trees have not yet produced their crops. So from this day onward, I will bless you. All right, cool. And we're talking about, back in earlier in the chapter, he says, in just a little while, I'll shake the heavens and the earth, the oceans and the dry land. I'll shake all the nations, and the treasures of all the nations will be brought to this temple. I will fill this place with glory, says the Lord of heaven's armies. The silver is mine, the gold is mine. The future glory of this temple will be greater than its past glory. It's funny, because when it actually was built, physically, it didn't have its past glory. So, that's basically all I'm going to say on Haggai. Zechariah is packed with messianic imagery, as well as garden-like imagery, as well as is a compilation of pretty much everything we've been talking about since the spring. So
14 is a good chapter.
What?
I said 14 is a really good chapter. Go ahead.
You're talking about where we're talking about the ending there? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very much. This is why it's arguable. Remember when I said about Daniel, it's arguable that there are other sections that talk about the end of the ages. This is the argument when it comes to Zechariah. But let's go ahead and take a look at a few things. I'm only going to do a few because it's everywhere. It's crazy. There's a lot of this stuff here. Anyway, so Talking about the horses, the riders, all that stuff, that makes its appearance in Zechariah. Then we have like, but I'm trying to find out like where I would like to start. Yeah, right on here. 118. Then I looked up and saw 4 animal horns. What are these? I asked the angel who was talking with me. He replied, these horns represent the nations that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. Remember what I said about horns being nations. Then the Lord showed me 4 blacksmiths. What are these men coming to do? I asked. The angel replied, these 4 horns, these nations scattered and humbled Judah. Now these blacksmiths have come to terrify those nations and throw them down and destroy them. And then it says, I'm trying to think of how I'm going to present this one. .210. Let's go to that one. The Lord says, shout and rejoice, O beautiful Jerusalem. I'm feeling Handel's Messiah in here. Anyway, for I am coming to live among you. Many nations will join themselves to the Lord on that day, and they too will be my people. That's like heresy, even in Jewish terms. Like when you're talking about like the fact of the Gentiles coming to join. Now it is part of the scripture. I'm not, and they did recognize that, but think of how scandalous it was when God called the Gentiles into his like when that whole situation that Paul did a lot of work trying to calm the problems between the Jews and the Gentiles. Okay, so it's like, yeah, anyway, I will live among you, and you'll know that I am the Lord of heaven. That the Lord of heaven's army sent me to you. The land of Judah will be the Lord's special possession in the Holy Land, and he will once again choose Jerusalem to be his own city. Be silent before the Lord, all humanity, for he is springing into action from his holy dwelling. So now we got chapter 3. This is cute. Come on. Let me get the interlinear going. Oh, this is such a cool part. So we're back again in God's holy assembly. So the high priest, Joshua, or Yeshua, or there's many different ways. In Hebrew, it's Yehoshua. Was the high priest was standing before the angel of before God, and the accuser was standing at where? The accuser at the angel of the Lord's right hand. Now that is interesting. So remember when we talked before about in Job how God in his counsel allows accusations to take place, and it's often translated as Satan. Even here in this interlinear translation, it's translated as Satan, but it's not. It is the accuser. And God himself says, I'm not listening to your accusations anymore. Even though he sits at the right hand of God. Be aware. At the right hand of God. Like that, like think about that. Like in the modern Christian, what?
I said yes.
Yeah, like think of like the modern Christian way of looking at Satan, right? And it's like, wait a second. Like, do you think that in modern churches they would say that Satan sits at God's right hand? And so I don't.
Yeah, church.
Although, Joel, I think it needs to be said that it's not Satan, but the Satan, the adversary,
The
accuser.
Right.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is this word is often translated as Satan. Even on this interlinear, it's translated as Satan, but it's actually accuser. Look at the, it's like a little finger, like a hand, kind of like this, and then you got I don't know.
Yeah, I'm looking at the transliteration above it where it says Ha-Satan.
Yeah, it's the, right? We're talking about the, like Hamelech.
Yeah, ha is the, right?
Yeah, the accuser.
Right.
And then
not a name. It's not his name.
Wait. What was the accuser doing? But accusing.
Right.
Yeah. So, this is a final N. This is an N in the middle of a word. So this N here. So this is the shape inside of a word. At the end of a word, it takes this shape, but it's the same exact letter.
Up in lowercase.
Right. No, they're called...
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
They're called finals. They're called finals. Arabic has initial, medials, and finals. Hebrew only has finals in comparison to the rest of the letters. Anyway, that's the thing. Anyway, so...
Okay. So, Joel, I got a question for you. If you had a Bible trivia question and you said, who stands at God's right hand? Would you be correct in saying the Satan, the adversary?
Yes, you would.
And especially when you think about it in the New Testament, it's Christ that's at his right hand. Jesus is at his right hand. Interesting, isn't it?
And isn't it interesting, too, that when Christ is at his right hand, what does he do instead of accuse? He's the one that vouches.
Yeah.
Right.
He vouches. Right. So it's like, and this is when God says, I'm not listening to your accusations anymore. So it's, anyway, where is it? It's in 2. Anyway, I repeat.
So,
yes?
is the inference here that when Jesus ascended to the right hand of God,
he took the accuser's place?
He replaced
yes.
the accusers.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You got it. You hit it on the head. Yep. And I think that's even more precious when you think of the relationship that God has with his people, right? It's a cool point. It's a really cool point. And I think when you conceptualize it in that particular way, I think it even makes God even more dear. No longer does he listen to the accuser because he himself came to earth and he himself lived as a human. He was a human. And because of his death, he replaces the accusation. It's really amazing. And so that's why I have a big problem when I hear the guilty consciences of churches. Like when I hear it's like, oh, we are always so guilty. It's like, we're accusing ourselves at this point. And it's like, and so instead of the accuser being on the right hand, the accuser becomes ourselves. Because it's like when we turn to God, he washes that stuff away. And it's like, yes, we still fall short, we still miss the mark, we still sin. But it's not accused. It's like when we truly recognize him, the accuser is gone. There is
I dare say when we condemn ourselves, that's a satanic attribute.
Exactly. That's the whole point. I actually heard someone, I think it was George White, that said that he was talking to a Catholic priest, and the Catholic priest says, why is it that Protestants are so burdened by guilty consciences? It was like, and I see it now. Like, I actually see it. It's like, we're always going to him for forgiveness, and I'm just like, why? It's like, why? It's not like we have to keep asking for his forgiveness. It's like, I get it. I hope I'm not being misunderstood here. I recognize that we're... What?
I was just saying you need to constantly repent and turn and go towards God, not necessarily groveling. And that type
of thing. Exactly. Not as groveling aspect of it. It's like, I see I've made a mistake. I recognize the sin. I admit it. I work toward coming closer to him. And it's just like, well, that's a lesson learned. I keep moving forward. I don't go. Now, there are certain sins that do call for, like, vast repentance. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but it's like when we recognize him and we keep our eyes fixed on him, even when we go like that, he's like, oh, no, back on here. Okay, we're good. Like, not that. Go ahead.
Well, based on this argument, we just talked about this. I mean, that the scribes had a problem with Daniel doing something like that, saying, I'm too weak, I can't do it. And they're saying he's disqualified because he kicked himself around saying, I can't do it, how can I do it, I'm too weak.
Moses did
if they
too.
saw that as wrong, then I mean, if we're running around just, cutting ourselves up every day, which, again, like Joel, not to be misunderstood, I understand we need to be humble and repentant and constantly striving to be close, but I don't think God wants us to be worms about it. Mm-hmm. But if the scribes had a problem with Daniel doing something like that, and I still think that's a stretch. I mean, in my mind, it's like, he was very, very strong.
It's worth pondering.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah,
it's worth pondering.
Yeah. But that we're putting ourselves in that position that they were calling disqualification.
It's interesting.
Disqualifying characteristic.
It's interesting, Joel. If you continue reading in chapter 3 all the way down to like 5 or 6, it talks about exactly what you were talking about here. Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and was standing before the angel in verse 3. Then he said and spoke to those who stood before him, saying, take away these filthy garments. And to him he said, see, I removed your iniquity from you. I have clothed you with rich robes. I said, let them put a clean turban on his head. So that he put a clean turban on his head, and they put the clothes on him, and the angel of the Lord stood by. And then it continues on, and then goes into a prayer and stuff. But, I mean, that's symbolic of what you're saying.
What does stood by mean?
What's that?
What does it mean to stand by?
Stand by.
Mm-hmm.
He was observing? What? I don't know. What are you getting at?
Hold on. I'm looking here.
Didn't he stand by him because he was telling him what God was saying? If you walk in my ways and keep my requirements, is what my Bible says, you will govern my house.
Say that again. I'm trying to say it one more time.
Okay.
Yeah.
The angel of the Lord gave this charge to Joshua. This is what the Lord Almighty says. If you will walk in my ways and keep my requirements, then you will govern my house and have charge over my court.
Mm-hmm.
And I will give you a place among those standing.
And it's funny, you're right. And I think what's interesting here is, like, God himself said, I'm not listening to the accuser anymore.
Yeah.
And yet he rises Joshua, my version says Joshua, up to a certain position. And the Hebrew word means he took his stand. He took his stand, like he he took his stand at a position with like with Joshua and said, like what you just read, if you follow my ways, then you will have authority over the temple. There's also correlation later on in Zechariah, and I'm sure everyone here has heard of it before, that Joshua, we were talking about like the multifaceted, like the many layers of interpretation. And it's like you have, there was an actual Joshua, and more than likely a hint of the Joshua to come.
Yes. So, interesting nameplay there, huh?
Why do you think the angel said his name will be Jesus? Like his name will be Yahushua. And that, like, there's reason that they said his name will be this. And it's fascinating. And like
in verse 8 too, it talks about, "Behold, I am bringing forth my servant, the branch."
Mm-hmm. I was just gonna get there.
Okay.
Just gonna get there.
Sorry, didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I'm just looking at the word stuff. Mm-hmm. Yes. Hold on. The branch. Yes. So it is a sprout. It is a small, it's something that can either be a shoot, like an offshoot, like a stem.
Sounds like a root of Jesse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's a new tree, or it can be an offshoot of a tree. And it's, but, so, no, I'll wait for the New Testament on that one. So anyway, and not to mention, Joshua in this book is elevated to a priest king.
Yes.
And it's like, and there's also interesting interplay when the angel of the Lord talks to the Lord. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Like it is like actually asking the Lord questions. The angel of the Lord, who's the Lord himself. And it's interesting. It's like so, like all of this stuff is just amazing.
Don't you talk to yourself? Don't you talk to yourself? What? Don't you talk to yourself? I do it all the time.
That is a good way of representing it. Also, you have the olive trees around the lampstand that have the you have the oil over the 7 lamps. You have there's just so much stuff in this book, and you have like the women, the woman who's named Wicked and is sent off, and then a temple is built for her. This is Lady Folly. And this is like and this is like, you're talking about the Babylonians, which were like the antithesis of godliness in terms of scribal way. Even regardless of Daniel assimilating, like they viewed Babylon always has been like the antithesis of godliness. And so Lady Folly is whisked away. And they build a temple to her where she would be the head of that temple. You have and then it goes into more like visions of like chariots, and also, wait a second, I was going somewhere with Lady Folly. Oh, Babylon. Hold on. We'll come back to Babylon. Okay, I'm just trying to think of like but in 6 you have Joshua becoming a king. You have all the different blessings. It's very Eden-like imagery. And it says like, the grapevines will be heavy with fruit. The earth will produce its crops, and the heavens will release the dew. Once more, I will cause the remnant of Judah and Israel to inherit. It talks about like other nations grasping at the hem of the Israelites and begging that they let's stay with them. and it's like saying your God is God, and it's it's cool. It's actually my name that they say. Where is that? It's at the end of a chapter. Oh, there it is. End of 8. It's the end of 8, and it says, please let us walk with you, for we have heard Emmanuel. It's not Emmanuel because it's like God is with you. It's different, but it's very it's different. Imanu means with us. Imcho would be with you, or imchem. Yep, imchem.
What chapter are you on?
I'm gonna show what.
What chapter are you on?
End of 8, last verse.
Oh, I'm still in 7. That's why. Okay.
Let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Elohim olimchem. And just let us go olimchem, with you, for we have heard God is with you. That's very poetic. It's really cool. So yeah, it's like, let us be with you too, for God is with you. And it's like, so let us all be together. It's a really cool book. It's so cram-packed with everything. It's like amazing. Like the talking about the judgment. Okay. So it's talking about like the judgment that happens against the nations, but if you look at it closely, you can see that there's a twist. There's like in 9:7, I will grab the bloody meat, and the surviving Philistines will worship our God and become like a clan in Judah. The Philistines, the surviving Philistines. If you're looking at it from a Christian perspective, if they're granted everlasting life, there's so much in there. So, 9:9. Rejoice, O people of Zion, shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He's righteous and victorious. He's humble, riding on a donkey's colt. I will remove the battle chariots from Israel and the war horses from Jerusalem. I will destroy all the weapons used in battles, and your king will bring peace to the nations. His realm will stretch from sea to sea and from the Euphrates River to the ends of the earth. Because of the covenant I made with you, sealed with blood, I will free your prisoners from death in a waterless dungeon. Come back. It's like, like, come back to the place of safety, all you prisoners who still have hope. I promise this very day that I will repay you 2 blessings for each of your troubles. Judah is my bow, and Israel is my arrow. Jerusalem is my sword. And like a warrior, I will brandish it against the Greeks. And it's sons of someone. Who's the other one? Sons of Javan. But like it's great. But anyway. The Lord will appear above his people. His arrows will fly like lightning. The sovereign Lord will sound the ram's horn and attack like a whirlwind from the southern desert. The Lord of heaven's armies will protect his people, and they will defeat their enemies by hurling great stones. They will shout in battle as though drunk with wine. They'll be filled with blood like a bowl, drenched with blood like the corners of the altar. What's the corners of the altar? Why is there blood there? Sacrifice?
Yeah.
Think of the imagery. Why are they're going to be drenched with blood like corners of it's like they're the altar? That's interesting imagery. It's like, that's what I'm saying is if you pay attention, Like, it's very, it's like there's nuances that's like not in the way you think. It's like they overtake in a way that you can't quite expect.
Yeah, look at the verse right after that, Joel 16.
On that day, the Lord their God will rescue his people, just like a shepherd rescues his sheep. They will sparkle in his land like jewels in a crown. How wonderful and beautiful they will be. The young men will thrive on abundant grain, and the young women will flourish on new wine. What are you saying?
No, I was just talking about
The shepherd?
follow-up of that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
about the
Like,
table of blood. And it's like right after that, he goes into the good things. As far as blessings and stuff.
I think.
Yeah, because the sentence just before 16 is like the corners of the altar, and then look at the turn from being sounding like there's destruction and hate, mayhem, and then it's like peace and shalom.
Right. But I'll say two things here. One thing about Zechariah is, the question is this an end time thing? Like Daniel, I think there's argument against it as well as argument for it. So that's why I was saying Daniel is clear cut. That's absolute. But when you're looking at Zechariah...
it's both.
It's both,
duality.
Right. I would say similarly. Now, the other thing I was going to say is, look at the Pharisaical interpretation of this. It is very well understood that this is going to be great retribution, like great, like riding on in and taking them down. Right.
And Jesus did just not fill that image, except for when he entered the temple.
When he comes on a donkey, there was the potential there. Like when he comes in, like on the colt, they're like, okay, but you're still going to take down your enemies, right? And it was kind of amazing when he was like overturning the tables in the temple, and then he died.
Yep. Yeah.
So they have returned to paradigm.
Right. It's really, really cool. So when you read this book, read it with that type of mindset. It is everywhere. It's really. And it's like even at the end of 13, it's like it's like talking about the scattering of the sheep. And I love the end of 13 where it says, "I will say, these are my people, and they will say, the Lord is our God." That's my name. That's my name. That's I knew there was a section that had my name in it.
And you're going to show us, right?
Yep.
Gave you that idea.
You mean Eric, right, Joel? Eric?
Right. So there it is. The yo comes from this letter here and this letter here. So that's the Y, and then the J in my name, the O in my name, the E in my name, the L in my name. And it's like, pardon me. But yeah, it's like they will say my name, or they will say my name, they will say. And because if you remember right, I talked about how my name is the counterpart to Elijah. Because that means my God is Yah. And then you have hold on, my computer is being weird. It's trying to pick a thing. Hold on. Just trying to get it to stop hiccuping for a second. There we go. But yeah, so it's like the counterpart to my name is Elijah. Eli means my God. Jah is Yah. And so my name is the reverse of that, which is Yahweh is my God. And the my is like left out, but it's inferred. And like it's definitely inferred because of its parallel with Elijah. Anyway, it's so cool. We actually had a whole Hebrew lesson on that one about like the names that can flip around. But anyway, so like
that's basically all I got on Zechariah 14. That is definitely end time lookalike, but there are arguments against it. But honestly, it doesn't matter. Because honestly, even if you look at Joel, it's very similar. Look at me. No, but if you look at the prophet Joel, it's very similar. You have his spirit will fill his people, and it'll overtake the earth. It's like Zechariah is like an expanded version of Joel. Yep. And it talks about how all the nations will come together to celebrate the feast. And if you look at it as a wedding feast, that is very interesting. And then those that don't are considered disgraced. And we were just talking about what happens when the opposite of getting the everlasting life is disgrace, and it's so much. All right. So, anything anyone wanted to talk about in Zechariah?
There's too much.
Yeah, there is too much. There really is. But I hope that just whets your appetite to read things more in depth. But guys, so no. Nope. It's just I'm just looking at the temple imagery here, and it's if you think about us being the temple. Oh yeah.
So one thing I find interesting in the last two verses, 20 through 21. Think about that and the meaning of that.
Yeah, the temple will be that's exactly what I was looking at when I said the temple imagery will be as sacred as the basins in the altar. Yes.
Yeah. But everything will be dedicated to the Lord.
Right.
And everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And we'll be singing hymns in heaven forever.
Yeah, then we'll just be playing lyres and harps.
Yeah. What are you lying about now, Joel? What are you lying about now, Joel?
I'm very biting when it comes to because I'm angry. I'm trying to not. I don't know if anger is the right word.
Mm-hmm.
Is it angry? It's like at the powers that be.
Righteous indignation.
Right. Like I am angry at the powers that be that really have diluted the message of Scripture.
No, they're coming forth.
Oh, you heard it?
Yeah.
Oh no, they caught us! No.
It's a fire truck, though. All right.
Fahrenheit 453 or something.
Yeah,
451.
Yeah. But no, seriously, though, I do believe that honestly, it was there was human interaction there as well as like the powers of the air. Because the thing is, though, the amount of dilution, the amount of dilution, or how diluted things have gotten over the millennia. Yeah, it's just so. Because right now, I look at the Christian church and think it's so human now. It's so human thinking, and it's really sad. We're just exactly where we were when Christ came in terms of the Pharisees. And I said this before, if there's any indication of us being close to the end times, it's just how much we're very Pharisaical in our nature. What?
I think it's really ironic that you just said that, because when we were back here talking about Jesus going into Jerusalem on the donkey, it crossed my mind, and I thought, no, but I was thinking, I mean, if they were that far off then, I mean, we're kind of in that vein now, where, if they were that far off thinking that God was going to do what they thought he was going to do, because they're like, Jesus comes in on a donkey, and they're like, yes, he's our guy.
There
and
it
he
goes.
goes in and boom, everything goes on his head. What makes us think that we're any really different?
That's a lot of the reason why we're doing this Bible study as well, is to see that we're very much in the same position as they were back then. Now, the thing is, though, we've been in this position, though, for a little bit of time. So it's like, I don't know how long it'll last. But if there's any indication that we are in the time when God really takes over, I would say that this is a prime time for it. Don't get me wrong. People have for millennia thought that they were in the end times. So what I'm saying is we're definitely at that point, and we've been at that point for at least, I would say, 200 years. I would say about 200 years. So, what?
Can I add that?
No, go ahead.
I think that's an argument for approaching the scriptures like we're doing. I mean, and just with seriousness and humility, and basically, if not physically on our knees, which is good, but I mean, mentally and spiritually on our knees, looking for the truth and willing to see it, and willing to see things that sometimes something we wanted to say isn't exactly what's being said, and maybe sometimes what we think it's saying isn't exactly what it's saying. Just to be willing to do that and see that and understand, because when Jesus came, there were those that when he told them, they accepted it. They did accept it then, but they didn't understand it, because like when he died, they took off, but then they came around and understood what I'm saying. And then there were those that killed him because of what he said. And I don't want to be on that side.
Hold on.
Sure.
Hold on, I'll say this. What we're talking about today, do you notice that this is a small group? And it has become small. And I am fully aware that a lot of the things that we talked about in this study really shake the foundation of a lot of Christian thought. And I say Christian as an institution. And I say that knowing that it's like, well, I think we're actually entering a realm of it is the things that we talked about here. Declaring something like this in a church, especially if I were to just walk down the street and into a church and start talking about this stuff, is out of this.
Yeah, they think you're off your rocker.
Yeah. When I had that, I had a debate at one point in time with someone who was a friendly debate, with someone, and who was in a high-ranking position within a certain denomination. A very high-ranking position, almost as high as you can go. And
talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to say particular.
That's how you're good.
And he was one position down from as basically as high as you can go. And I started talking about certain concepts because of something else that someone was saying, and that person didn't like it. Because he said it made him very uncomfortable. I could tell he thought it was very unbiblical. And it was...
Do you remember what he said, though, about that?
Go ahead.
He said that it went against the tradition.
Right, he did. And he also brought up all these scholars and all these scholars. And what did the Pharisees do? This is where you have Paul coming from the seat of whom? Anyway, so you see where we're going with this in terms of this conversation. It is difficult, a lot of the stuff we're talking about, and I think, and I hope this makes us even bolder, because it's there are times when my human nature gets terrified when I think of the things that we talked about, knowing very well where this can lead. But that's all I'm saying on that. You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. So that's all I'll say. So, I love the title of last week's session, Best Left Unsaid. Anyway.
But
yeah,
you would think that hopefully at some point you come to know the remnant that haven't bowed the knee, like God told Elijah.
Yeah. You're talking about the yes. I know what you're talking about.
Reserved. He had them reserved.
Yeah.
He had reserved.
But
thousands that hadn't bowed the knee.
I know, like that. I know, and I'm not saying we're the only ones. I'm not.
I understand that. What I'm saying is, then that's when it. And maybe God doesn't want that necessarily at a given point, but hopefully, and my prayer is that we can meet them.
Well, of course we will at one point. But anyway,
one thing I was thinking, Joel, would be interesting maybe if you talk about apocalyptic or revelation type stuff, and how that doesn't always mean what it says as far as the symbolism. And I'm just saying how it's broad brushing, and you need to understand the context. Like the moon will cease, will turn to blood, and the sun will.
What have we been talking about in this study? We're talking about.
I know, but I'm thinking in this context, we're talking about when Christ's first coming versus his second coming. Everybody thinks it's going to be World War III. It might be.
I know.
But the thing is, we might very well be shocked. We're going to say peace, peace when there is no peace, and we don't realize how bad it is because we all slowly get stuck into the pit.
Peace when there is no peace comes from Jeremiah. What does that actually mean, though? In my opinion, it means that people are saying, look, we have finally attained peace. Peace is great. We have this peace. But really, there is no peace. And a lot of people interpret that as, oh, my goodness. A lot of people interpret that as, oh, we want peace, but there is no peace, and it's all like this war.
Oh, no.
I personally believe we're going to get to a point where we attain world peace, but yet there's no peace here. And there's a and that's why I think
that could be either way. I think. I could see ambiguous.
I don't think so. The reason why is because of the imagery that we're looking at right now in Zechariah.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's going to be destruction and stuff like not quite. And I think that's where we're going over to Jeremiah.
It's a lot of symbolism. It's a lot of let me get your attention here because you're not paying any attention. But the reality is that it's not necessarily going to be the heavens and the stars are going to be falling from the skies. You're going to think they are, but as far as the conditions possibly, or maybe not necessarily think they're going to be. It's going to be more like when God comes in and changes things, he's going to turn the world upside down.
Right.
Yeah.
The stars is when the other council members bow down. That we talked about this in this study. Remember that?
I know. We're talking about the subject. That's all. I know we talked about it.
A lot of people think, oh yeah, it's going to be like a hellfire and brimstone. No, that's not what it's saying. It's that imagery is it. It's once again the unveiling of things. So when it's like you see this, but yet you see this is really what's happening. And so it's like the when this is brought into, it'll be once again an overturning, but the heavenly realm of it will be much like a war. But the actual way it comes across is like when this it's
we don't fully know. We need to, as Jesus said, we need to watch and be ready always.
Right.
And see what's going on, and you got to watch yourself as much as what's going on around you in the world.
I do want to mention one thing before we end up with finishing, though. So I just wanted to clarify, we might go 10 to 15 minutes over our normal time.
Are we already? Are we already going over, Joel? It's almost 9:30.
No, we usually end around this time. I'm just going to say I do want to hammer a couple points home because I think this is perfect. This conversation we're having is perfect. I do want to get to this. Ezra 5. At the very beginning of Ezra 5, it says, at that time the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem. They prophesied in the name of God of Israel, who's over them. Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, son of Jehozadak, responded by starting again to rebuild the temple of God in Jerusalem. And the prophets of God were with them and helped them. Now, you just looked at Haggai and Zechariah. What did it say? Just think of what I said. Okay, so okay, cool. Building the temple. God said that. Taking care of these things. Starting afresh. God said that. God said from this day forward, everything else from behind, that's fine. From this day forward is what we're looking, right? Okay. We talked about the implications of Ezra and Nehemiah. What do they not do for both books in the Christian tradition or the single book in the Jewish tradition? The whole Ezra and Nehemiah story. What do they never do once? Ezra or Nehemiah?
Seek God.
Not one time. They never
seek God's direction in what they're doing.
They listened to Haggai and Zechariah. They did. But what Haggai and Zechariah said was God said he was going to make things better than ever before. And that from this day forward, follow me. Like that's basically what he said, right? Ezra and Nehemiah take extra steps. So they do some good. They rebuild the temple. They rebuild the walls. There's this whole stuff like where they go into. Now we're talking about now. What did they do historically speaking? They went to the Persians. They appealed to the king of Persia. Who was the king of Persia's ultimate enemy? They just invaded and destroyed.
What?
Babylon. They just invaded and destroyed Babylon. Remember that we were talking all the way up to this point from the very beginning of the compilation of the texts and the presentation to the Persian king. When this happened, they made Babylon look super bad, okay? This is yes, Babylon has always been a negative figure in Scripture. I personally believe they made them look super bad. To the point where everything, the culmination of everything has to do with Babylon. You look at Zechariah. Where was Lady Folly whisked off to? Babylon. When you
Babylon the Great.
Babylon the Great has fallen. Right. When you're talking about Babel as the place where they built a tower for themselves. When you talk about Nebuchadnezzar building a statue to himself, when you're talking about Babylon is the evil that is often referred to. If you want any indication of anything that the Christians view as Satan, any indication of that in the Scripture itself, Babylon. Babylon is personified to a point of you have Lady Folly being Babylon, and you have Lady Wisdom being it's being God. It's the two are this, okay? That is the Hebrew Bible's conception. The closest thing that they got to an actual how we think of Satan is Babylon, and so that's a huge point. They presented to the king, Cyrus and Darius. They presented to the king and say, look, they're the bad guys, right? Now this is the thing. Historically speaking, yes, I'm not saying that they drastically altered the text. What I am saying though is what they presented to the king was very much anti-Babylon, and notice too, as in Nehemiah, it's written in Aramaic, and there is so this is from before that point they presented it in Hebrew, and this is the this is where and then you have Cyrus is Cyrus and Darius are oh cool, you're against Babylon? Yeah, go back and build your temple. Go ahead and do these things. No problem.
Yep.
They found friends. So, and I think it's interesting. Now, not to mention too, Persia And Babylon too, actually. Persia and Babylon were both very diplomatic countries. That's why when you had like the whole thing with like Daniel becoming a member of the court, very diplomatic move. When you're talking about Persia, they were very diplomatic. The Greeks hated Persia, but the thing is that like Persia was seen as a very modern society in terms of like how we would look at them. Like if you look at, there's a very positive,
very multicultural.
Right,
yep.
Very mutually understanding. It was very much in a positive light in the historian's eye. Babylon too, actually, but that's interesting how we humans look at Babylon in Persia and think, huh, they did pretty good. So I think it's interesting how the Bible saying no.
But the Bible uses Babylon as a type of every society and every people in this world, in this governments, in their countries or their empires or whatever they have, because human nature eventually falls to that level.
I got another example, Rome. But we're not there yet.
Rome is definitely, but if you look at every single civilization that ever rose up in the world,
you're right.
It starts off really good, and then it usually winds up like Babylon.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
no, but that's basically. I agree with what you said about them convincing the king of Persia to let them go rebuild the temple, etc. But I also think that Babylon, because of the historical events with Israel, biblically it became the foil for all kingdoms. Right.
Mm-hmm. It is. Babylon became the symbol for all other nations.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you really...
They had a historical implication as well. Mm-hmm.
What's that?
No, absolutely. Sorry, we were talking about the multi-layer thing,
yeah,
right?
Right. No, right, yeah. Right, but what I'm saying biblically, when we look at what?
Like, just like we're looking at Zechariah with the actual Joshua, and then another Joshua that comes 400 years later.
Type and annotate, yeah. Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is when you read Revelation or any prophecies or look at what the scriptures say, you got to take it in the fact that it's being dramatized there, if you will, to show the importance of it. But it's not necessarily an actual what people think it is. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say that it's not actually what's going to happen. It is what's going to happen. The question is, how does God mean that to happen?
Exactly. You got it.
Right.
Absolutely. There's a bit of a veil when it comes to that. Yeah.
Right. We're looking through the glass darkly, and I'll shut up.
I just had a thought. Babylon the Great. It's like the one world government. At the end, it's the redux of Babel. It's like the final culmination of human rebellion.
Got it.
And Babel at the end time.
Look at this tower we built for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's the whole world together, and nothing will be out of our reach.
It's everything.
Like they said at Babel.
Going back to what Dad said.
There won't be anything we won't be able to do, they'll be saying.
Babylon was an actual place, but it became known as of all nations. Why? Look at Genesis 6. We already talked about this. And Genesis 11. Or 10. 11. 10. We already talked about this. Like, yes, it is seen, and that's where human nature goes. Human nature always goes to the point of, look how amazing we made ourselves, and we didn't need any gods for this. And and what does Nebuchadnezzar do? He built a statue. He did it because God helped him with it. And so this is too much. I can't list all of it, but yeah, like you're right. You're dead on it. Dad's dead on it. Mom's dead on it. Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
I was just going to say you were breaking up. I think you were just talking too fast.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with what both of you are saying quite perfectly.
No, I heard you, but you were breaking up, I think, because you were talking really, really fast. That's all. I was just wanting to let you know.
So, to finish up Ezra Nehemiah, and I wanted to say one thing about Chronicles, and then I was going to close things out. Ezra Nehemiah. So God said from this day forward, right? People had already married like people had already married foreign wives, had already had children with them. And that concept of when they are told to divorce is contrary to what Zechariah said to do in Haggai. And it says don't do anything from this day forward. Basically, it says like the implication is to Zechariah is all about like the foreigners becoming like a major part of the kingdom of God. But what does Ezra and Nehemiah? What do Ezra and Nehemiah do? They exclude them. Mm-hmm. And and they said no, this is ours. It's for us. It's and there's a twisting. I have never heard this said in a church, ever. It's clear to me, though, that this is not a model of how to do things. It is clear to me when you look at Nehemiah instituting regulations and forcing the gates to pull up on the Sabbath day, instead of what I believe God would have wanted to have the gates down and to invite people in. What does Zechariah talk about? You will invite and you will sit with the foreigners. It's very clear in Zechariah. It's toward the end of Zechariah. I think it's like in 12 or something. And it's like you're going to sit with outsiders and join them in meals. But what happens in Nehemiah? The gate is drawn on Sabbath. And then they have like their Feast of Booths, which we're in right now. They have it, but it's just like everyone else is excluded. No one else is allowed in. And it's like, so instantaneously, it's back to where we were.
Okay,
and
but one thing I wanted to throw out there, you look at their environment, they thought one of the reasons they went into captivity is because they mixed with the people around them and polluted their worship of Yahweh. And therefore they were setting up the walls as high as they could. But I'm not justifying it. I'm looking at it from their perspective.
I
don't agree with the divorce. They should never have done that. They should have kept that going. Okay, that type of thing. I can understand why they would close the gates on the Sabbath because they didn't want people doing commerce in the city during that time. So it's like it's a mixed bag is what I'm trying to say.
That's the point. You got it. Ezra Nehemiah is about a mixture of good and bad. You have a mixture of God what wants and doesn't want. And I think what God would have preferred was the discouraging of things being sold on the Sabbath, and then through the example of others not doing anything on the Sabbath, people are like, that seems like a good idea. And that type of thing, that's exactly what Christians are called to do, is to be a positive influence to others just by the way they live. And so I see that, and it is a mixed bag, because like when you said like, oh yeah, they got intermarried before, that caused issues before. Like I can see where they're coming from. That's human nature, building walls, just like the Christian church has for the past 2,000 years. When it comes to this, is like a new book to me now. The Bible is like a brand new scripture to me because I feel as if like the millennia of ourselves building these walls has been a detriment rather than an asset.
To tell you the truth, Joel, the way I look at it, the Jews had a little bit more of a reason to do what they did than the Christians do, because the Christians are to go out and welcome everybody everywhere into the church and, reach out to the world. We shouldn't be building walls.
You're right, but I have to. But what?
To a certain extent.
Yeah,
because I know I went to this one church, and this guy attended the church, and he's an alcoholic, and he looked like an alcoholic. Do you know most of the people would not even greet that man? Mm-hmm. I felt horrible. My heart was breaking because I went over and talked to him and stuff, but the church made it very well known he was not welcome in that church.
And it was the church.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he might not have even been a Christian, and that would have been a perfect time to welcome him and try to help. the situation, not condemn them.
So it goes back to the whole Jewish question then. Did they have really a reason? Because God quite said you're going to be an example among the nations. What do other nations do? Walls.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
I'm not trying to, Joel, I'm not trying to justify what they did in Ezra and Nehemiah. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that based in the environment, I could see their mindset and their paradigm was such that they weren't grasping what God was telling them through Zechariah and Haggai. But what I'm trying to say, even more so, we can learn from them. And why are we still doing the Ezra and Nehemiah stuff?
Right. I am hammering home the point, though. It's human nature that gets in the way.
Exactly. That's exactly what gets in the way.
They had a reason, a human reason. But we're talking about God calling them to a higher purpose.
Right.
And they had all the reason in the world to do what they did. That's why we as humans today, when we look at Ezra and Nehemiah, it's usually in a positive light.
I know.
I think, honestly, it's not supposed to be. And another thing, too, is the very last chapter of Nehemiah. How many times does Nehemiah say, remember what good I did for you, God?
Don't forget. Look at my counting my brownie points.
It's made in a poetic verse in my Bible. It says, remember this good deed, oh my God, and do not forget all I have faithfully done for the temple of my God and its services. Later on it says, remember this good deed also, oh my God, have compassion on me according to your great and unfailing love. Next, remember them, oh my God, for they've defiled the priesthood.
He's like the little kid bouncing around.
And he says, remember them, oh my God, for they defiled the priesthood, and the psalm about asking for like condemnation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very last verse is remember this in my favor. And it's like, don't tell me. I know you guys aren't like, but I'm just saying it's like, don't tell me that this is meant as a deterrent. Don't be like this. Like, this is not what it means to be God. In this last chapter here, he rips out people's hair. He punches, he beats people up. And then he goes to God saying, I did this for you. It's like,
amazing. Yeah, it sounds like something else where it says they'll kill you thinking they're doing God a service.
Exactly. And I actually wrote some notes down here, for other. Where is it? Oh yeah, just it had to do with what you were talking about. Like I wrote this nothing like way back on Wednesday, and so, but yeah, you got like those who thinking they're doing God a favor, and another thing too is like think about how many Christian churches there are that have like these big gathering events, and they say that they're helping all these people, and it's like, tell me who?
Yeah.
Like, because Ezra and Nehemiah, there's a section here. There is a section in Ezra and Nehemiah when it talks about be good to the poor, do this for the needy, like, and they do these things, but then they exclude others, and then they deprive others, and then he beats people up, and then he's like,
yeah, I'm gonna take you behind the church and give you a few whacks here, baby.
Right? Yeah. And it's like, I'm following, like you're going to do exactly the way I say. Never, and I'm hammering home, never once do they consult God. Never once.
Mm-hmm. Nope.
We just read Daniel. What does Daniel do? When Nebuchadnezzar has a problem, Daniel goes to God and says, help. Like, help. What do I do?
Right.
Like, Moses does, Joseph does, like, all the major figures, they do it. And you got to remember this.
Stack them up behind the ones that you know did good, and compare. Yeah. Even though we're not supposed to compare ourselves among ourselves, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Then why are the scribes implying though that this was a good thing that they did? Was it good or no?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think they were?
No, we're going
to say, why would they have a negative view of Daniel in a moment of physical
I am telling you
weakness, and then these are the good guys.
Hold on, because I really do have to start wrapping things up. I really do. That was meant for next week.
Oh,
to answer
okay.
your question. I'll paraphrase. Remember that the scribes wrote this as a genuine, matter of fact. These are scribes. They write things. This is before the Maccabean revolt. We're going to talk about that. I do believe that they did not have a very positive outlook on this. They were just writing matter of fact what happened. There is a twisting of the word by the time you have the Pharisees and you have Jesus, and there is twisting and misinterpretation, and Jesus had to set a lot of things straight, right? And he always says, back in the time of the prophets, they did this, or they did that. I genuinely believe that, when Ezra and Nehemiah was written, it wasn't written in a positive light. Almost like a warning not to do this, not to act this way. And what did they do? They acted that way. Especially after the Maccabean revolt. Especially. And because they continue to act that way, and Jesus tells them, don't do this, 3 decades later, the temple falls. 4 decades later.
Yeah, and who were the people that Jesus told the Pharisees would enter the kingdom before them?
Right, you got it. Yeah, that's so that's what I'm saying is I do genuinely believe that Ezra and Nehemiah was just stated matter of fact on purpose. Mm-hmm. Because I think the scribes who were recording the scripture, who were writing again and again and again these words, they knew it. And they knew it better than Ezra and Nehemiah. And right. It's so when they wrote it, just like Chronicles, just like they did with Kings, they just stated it. Now,
it's interesting. I think of Jesus' words to the Pharisees and the people of his day. He says, you do err not knowing the scriptures. Because they might have read them, but they don't understand them.
You got it. Because he basically asked them, have they ever read the Bible? And there's a reason.
Right. Have you ever read the Bible?
So don't tell me that Ezra Nehemiah doesn't have a little bit of a wink and a smirk behind its words. All right, last thing we're doing. I do have to wrap this up. I have to get this done before 10 because, honestly, I don't think that going beyond 2 hours and 30 minutes for this session would be healthy. I don't think so.
You can always divide it in two, Joel.
Not this.
No.
Anyway, so if you look at 2 Chronicles 36, this is King Cyrus. Now, this is, Ezra and Nehemiah took place after this statement, but Chronicles basically sums the whole biblical story up to the point of them returning, correct? It's basically from the beginning to where they were all the way up to Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah technically takes place after Chronicles, but this is a scribal summary of everything. And just listen to how artistic this is. Starting in verse 22. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord fulfilled the prophecy he had given through Jeremiah. He stirred the hearts of Cyrus to put this proclamation in writing. Actually, stirring of the heart. He stirred up. It means to arouse or to awake. Anyway, so he aroused the heart of Cyrus to put this proclamation in writing and to send it throughout his kingdom. This is what King Cyrus of Persia says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has appointed me to build him a temple at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any of you who are his people may go there for this task, and may. It's interesting how Cyrus said, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. Yes, he has, but I don't think that God necessarily agrees with Persian rule. You know what I'm saying? It's so don't tell me that scribes aren't just writing this as matter of fact. Okay, so he has appointed me
but God does say that He appoints who is on the throne and what nations rise and what nations fall.
You're right.
But He doesn't necessarily condone what they do.
Right. And Cyrus is definitely putting himself in a very high position by his word.
Well, that's PR. It's a PR It's a PR document.
Exactly. It's a PR move. But like, think of it like David, though. David always gave the glory to God. He didn't. Cyrus is basically saying, "I'm glorified here because God glorified me, and I am glorious." He has appointed me to build him a temple at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any of you who are his people may go there for this task. And may the Lord your God be with you. The very last sentence. Okay. So who among you of all his people, so who among you, God, Yahweh, their God, it's really specific, but it's like of all you, may be with him. Oh, that's interesting. Imoel. So God be with him. Yeah. So may God be with him and let him. Do you remember this? Go up, bald head. Huh. Yeah. This is. Remember, we were talking about the point of down and up, and this is the very last word of the Jewish scriptures. And may him go up. May he go up. And this is the.
What did that mean? Refresh me, Joe. What does that mean? Go down versus go up?
Baal. A lot of things had to do with going down in Baal. So the blood would fall and hit the ground, and Baal would recognize it. So you have the smoke of the incense.
Yeah. I just needed to know where you were going. I couldn't remember exactly. Thank you.
And when Elijah, they were going after him, they said, "Go up, you bald head." It was Elijah or Elisha?
Right.
Elisha. And just go up, you bald head. And I remember I said this moment, like, oh! Because going up, they were making fun of his God. And so it's interesting that the very last word of the Jewish scriptures are, may he go up. And like, who among you made that person go up? Mm-hmm. And it's really cool. And that is the end of the Jewish scriptures. Next week, we will be looking at the Maccabean Revolt. We will be doing some background info and a summary of everything we've done, all the way leading up to Matthew.
You're going to do the Intertestament stuff?
Yes, for historical reasons. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. That would be cool. Cool.
Oh, I'm not doing the text. I am going to talk about the history, though, as like a preface into entering the gospel and the good news of the kingdom. This is so we're there. So I did want to, like, we were so close to the end here. It's like, we got to finish. It's like,
I didn't realize. I thought we were going to do Chronicles next week. I'm sorry.
No. I only had one thing to say about Chronicles. It had to do with going up, because honestly, Chronicles is just a rehashing of Kings. And it's like, and Samuel. It's like a rehashing. It's like a summary.
But it's a little bit different than Samuel and Kings, but it's slight modifications or perspectives. Spit it out, Joel. Spit it out.
Not really. Not really. I've heard a lot said that the reason because you have Kings and Chronicles next to each other is because one is from a godly perspective and one is from a more human perspective. No, it's both there. It's just like nuances.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about. It's basically the same story, but there's slightly different perspectives and different styles or way they put
nuances. For example, Manasseh as someone who repents. Instead of in Kings, there's no repentance story. But there is a story in Chronicles where Manasseh repents. But the crux of the story is the same. There really isn't anything greatly new that we haven't covered. However, I did want to hammer home that last word, go up.
Go up.
And so that it's that, so may our prayers rise up. And this is so cool. From the bottom of my heart, guys, this has been awesome. I can't believe that we're actually at the end of the Old Testament, halfway through the year. Can't wait for the New Testament. It's going to be so cool. So a culmination of everything.
So it's going to take another year and a half to go through the New. So you did the Old Testament in 6 months, so now you could do the New Testament in 2 years.
Right, exactly. No, but I do believe that the cramped nature of the New Testament is worth slowing down and looking at it from a Christian perspective now. But anyway, so all right, let's go ahead and give it to God, and then let's call it a night. So, Father, thank you. This is awesome that we are able to look at this. I really can't believe that we actually made it to the end of the New Testament. Like how all our conversation just like kept pushing the topic forward to the point where it did actually end up culminating in make it go up. That is, I cannot stop thinking of how the Bible is a brand new book to me now. I can't get enough of it. I can't get enough of your word. And I thank you for taking away, for revealing, for apocalypting this word to us, making us understand you on such a deeper level, and to really have that courage now. And now I personally believe we're starting to get that boldness of getting rid of those barriers that have kept us from coming closer to you. Father, may we throw that into your fire, and may we continue to come closer to you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for guiding us. Until next week, that we gather together with this. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I have to say, I forgot one. It came to me in the middle of the prayer. Fire. Talking about God, there's a section, I forget where, I think it's in Zechariah. God equated to a burning fire, and they're saying, like, let us throw, it's something similar along the lines of, let us take, like, this evil and throw it into God's fiery presence, basically. And it's like, so God is equated to a consuming fire, and so we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so I thought, until next week.